But it's a long-term process, isn't it? I mean, with your family, it's a long-term process. And there are people, you know, your father's generation, your generation, and the next generation. It's a long-term process.
You spent 30 years fighting for one man. You survived the scandals, the public hatred, the newspapers calling you the most hated woman in Britain. You buried the woman the whole world loved. You outlasted the critics. You walked into Westminster Abbey wearing a queen's tiara. You won. Or did you? Because right now, inside Buckingham Palace, something is being quietly dismantled. Not with cameras, not with press releases, not with a single dramatic confrontation. Just silence and precision, and two people who have been waiting a very, very long time. This is the story nobody is saying out loud. But sources close to the palace say it is already in motion, and Camilla Parker Bowles may not survive it. 3 weeks before this story began circulating in royal circles, a senior palace aide picked up a phone, not to call a journalist, not to call a government minister, to call a lawyer, on behalf of Princess Anne, about Camilla. The call lasted less than 10 minutes, short, precise, the kind of call, sources say, that someone makes after the decision is already made, when you just need to confirm the path is legally clear before you move. That 10-minute phone call, according to sources, was the opening move in something much, much bigger. Now, Princess Anne has been a member of this family for over 70 years. She watched everything unfold in real time. The affairs, the separation, the panorama interview, Diana's death. She processed all of it privately, professionally, the way she handles everything, completely locked down. So why now? Why 2026? Why, after nearly 3 decades of controlled silence, is Anne allegedly making moves? Sources say the answer has 2 parts, and you need both of them to understand what's really happening. The first part is William. Over the last 18 months, Prince William's position inside the monarchy has mentally shifted. He is no longer simply the heir waiting in the wings. He is making real financial decisions with real, lasting consequences. And the clearest place to see it, the Duchy of Cornwall. £1.2 billion in land, property, and investments. All of it under William's direct control. No approval required from Charles. No consultation needed from anyone. And William wasted 0 time making clear exactly how he intended to use that control. Annabelle Elliott, Camilla's younger sister, interior designer, had worked across duchy properties for nearly 20 years under Charles, earning anywhere from £19,000 to £82,000 annually, depending on the project. The moment William took over the duchy after Queen Elizabeth's death, Annabelle's name disappeared from the financial records. No dispute, no statement, just gone. And she wasn't replaced with a neutral hire. William brought in his own people, personal friends, godparents of his children, people loyal exclusively to him. Royal commentators noticed immediately. Sources say it caused significant ripples inside the palace, and the message it sent required absolutely no translation. Anne watched it happen. Sources say she approved completely, and according to those same sources, that decision opened a conversation between Anne and William that had been waiting years to take place, because both of them, for different but deeply personal reasons, had arrived at the same point at roughly the same time. Done waiting. The second part of the answer is Diana, and this is where the story gets genuinely significant. August 31st, 2027 will mark 30 years since Diana died in that Paris tunnel. 30 years since a 15-year-old William walked behind his mother's coffin through the streets of London in front of the entire world. He is now 43 years old, a husband, a father of 3. In nearly 3 decades of public life, he has never once made a direct statement connecting his feelings about Camilla to what his mother went through. He never had to. His actions have been making that statement for years. Sources say Anne reached a point in the past several months where she simply decided she was done. Done letting institutional loyalty override personal conviction. Done watching Camilla occupy spaces, literal and symbolic, that she believes belong to Diana's legacy. And when Anne decided to act, she had access to something that is now making certain people inside Buckingham Palace genuinely nervous. There is a room at Windsor Castle, the Royal Archives. No tourists, no documentary crews, no public access. What it contains is the unfiltered, unedited, privately recorded history of the British royal family. Letters, diaries, internal correspondence, the written record of what was actually happening inside the institution during the most turbulent decades of the 20th century, including the years when Charles and Diana's marriage was publicly and catastrophically falling apart. Princess Anne's access to those materials operates at a level very few people outside the immediate family possess, and sources suggest she has been reviewing them. Now, the broad strokes of the Wales marriage are already public knowledge: the 1992 separation, the Camilla Gate tapes in 1993, Charles's television confession in 1994, Diana's Panorama interview in 1995, the divorce in 1996, Diana's death in 1997. All of that has been documented, analyzed, and debated across 30 years of books and documentaries. What sources suggest exists in those archives goes much further. The specificity, the private, written record of who knew what and when, who facilitated what and how Diana's concerns were received and handled by the institution, the internal dimension of a situation the public record has only ever partially captured. Sources familiar with Anne's alleged archival review say the materials tell a story about institutional failure that goes considerably further than anything publicly available has ever documented. And Anne, sources say, believes that story deserves to be part of the complete historical record, not shaped or softened by the people who would rather it stayed in the dark. Camilla is one of those people. Meanwhile, William has been operating on a second front simultaneously. And this is where the story gets even more layered. The Duchy of Cornwall generated approximately £30 million in a single year in 2025. Tenant farms, holiday cottages, the Isles of Scilly, Dartmoor land rights, commercial investments accumulated across nearly 700 years of royal estate management, every pound of it controlled solely by William, and sources suggest he has been using that control with a precision that people inside Camilla's circle are only now fully appreciating. The Annabel Elliot removal was the opening move, but what followed went considerably further. Access to Crown events. Invitations previously extended to Camilla's wider family circle, quietly withdrawn. Appearances where Parker Bowles family members had expected to be present, restructured without explanation. The same slow, deliberate, entirely deniable narrowing of access applied across every connection between Camilla's family and the institution William controls. Nothing that generates a headline on its own. Everything that adds up to something unmistakable when you step back and look at the full picture. And then there's the Diana dimension of what William is doing financially, which sources describe as entirely intentional. William has been quietly redirecting duchy-connected philanthropic resources toward causes Diana originally championed. Mental health, homelessness, HIV awareness, the causes Diana made her own during her lifetime, the ones the establishment initially resisted because they were considered too raw, too political for a senior royal. Diana touched them anyway, and paid an institutional price for it. Now her son controls $1.2 billion in assets, and sources say he is pointing a significant portion of that toward exactly the places his mother pointed when the institution she belonged to was actively working to contain her. And then there's Charles. In February of this year, he made a phone call to Anne that sources describe as one of the most difficult conversations between the two siblings in decades. Not angry, not accusatory, quiet, pained. The call of a man who understands exactly what his sister is doing, exactly why she is doing it, and finds himself completely unable to argue against it with any real conviction. The call lasted 40 minutes. Nothing was resolved. That detail alone tells you almost everything. Charles is 76 years old. He was diagnosed with cancer in February 2024. He has maintained his public duties with discipline. But discipline is not the same as strength. And keeping up appearances is not the same as having the capacity to fight on multiple fronts simultaneously. Protecting Camilla from what William and Anne are allegedly doing would require sustained, repeated conflict, the kind he is least equipped for right now. It would mean telling William to restore access to people William deliberately removed. William would not comply. It would mean telling Anne to stop what she is allegedly doing with the archives. Anne would not comply. And it would mean positioning himself publicly against both his heir and his sister. in defense of the womb, and that millions of people still associate with his first wife's suffering. But here is the dimension sources describe as the most painful of all. He knows why they feel the way they feel, because he was there, and he was the cause. He is the man who conducted the affair that Diana described in terms of profound personal devastation. He is the reason that grief exists. How do you argue against your son's grief over his mother when you are the reason that grief exists? Sources say Charles cannot make that argument with genuine conviction because he does not fully believe it himself. So what does all of this actually add up to? There's a version of this story that looks like revenge. William and Anne methodically dismantling everything Camilla built as payback for what she did to Diana. But sources suggest the truth is something more considered, more permanent, and ultimately more meaningful than revenge. Think about what Diana actually stood for. Not the fairy tale, but the real substance. She touched AIDS patients when the establishment treated the disease as shameful. She walked through active minefields in Angola to make a point about civilian casualties. She sat with homeless people and looked them in the eye and treated them as fully human, in a way senior royals simply were not supposed to. She did all of it against the active resistance of an institution that found her emotional directness threatening and her popularity destabilizing. She was right about all of it. The institution was wrong. And William knows this, not as historical analysis, but as lived personal experience. He watched his mother be right while the institution punished her for it. Now he runs the institution. Sources suggest William's modernization agenda is not simply good management practice, it is Diana, expressed institutionally. The emotional intelligence she was told was inappropriate. The public accountability she was told was dangerous. The genuine human connection she was told was beneath the dignity of a senior royal. All of it allegedly being built into the architecture of the monarchy William is constructing. Camilla won the battle. She got Charles. She got the title. She got the coronation and the tiara and the seat beside the king. But the war was never about Charles. It was about Diana and what Diana represented, and whether the institution Diana tried to change would eventually become something worthy of the price she paid. William and Anne are allegedly building that institution now. Not for revenge, for Diana. And Camilla has no counter-strategy for that. You cannot argue against a legacy. You cannot litigate grief. You cannot outmaneuver a son who watched his mother die and spent 28 years deciding quietly and deliberately what to do about it. Diana never got to see what this monarchy could become. She got a Paris tunnel, 2 boys without a mother, and a family that barely lowered its flag. But something, sources suggest, is happening inside that palace right now that she never lived to see. Her son and her sister-in-law, moving together, quietly and permanently reshaping everything Camilla built into something Diana would have recognized as hers. Not revenge. Something better than revenge. Legacy. And that, more than any property dispute, any payroll decision, any symbolic tiara, is what sources describe as the darkest reality Camilla Parker Bowles has faced in 30 years. If this story made you think, drop a comment below. What do you think Diana would say if she could see all of this unfolding right now? And if you want more deep dive royal breakdowns like this one, subscribe, hit the bell, because the next chapter of this story is already developing, and you do not want to miss it.